Good morning.
Good morning.
For those of you who, like me, do not speak Ojibwe, you've gathered that Buju is good morning in Ojibwe. And I'd also like to use the Ojibwe word for thank you, which you all have gathered by now. If you don't speak Ojibwe, is Megwich, to express my gratitude to the American Indian College Fund and all of my friends and colleagues and brothers and sisters at the American Indian College Fund and in this room today, and to the peoples who inhabited these lands long before we visited. I'm Joshua Sparrow, and one thing that I didn't put into the bio in the little booklet that you have is that I was a preschool teacher before I went to medical school. I also, I think, neglected to say that in addition to our work serving as the National Center for Parent, Family, and Community Engagement for the Office of Ed Start and Office of Child Care, we also partner with the Tribal Research Center based in the University of Colorado, Denver, have worked with the National Science Foundation Indigenous Language Learning Work Group, and a number of other activities that I was reminded of as I listened to our wonderful presentations this morning. By way of introduction, I'll just add that this is the vision of the Brazelton Touchpoints Center. It's a world in which all children, and the emphasis is on all children, grow up to be adults who can strengthen their communities, constructively participate in civic life, steward our planet's resources, cope with adversity, and experience the joy of nurturing the next generation to do the same. And joy is important. I'm going to start with where the work comes from, because it comes from babies. And this is the only image that I've used because I don't want to engage in cultural expropriation or of harvesting. I was given permission by this mother to take a picture of her and her baby. She's from an indigenous people near Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. And she has this beautiful blanket. You have beautiful blankets on your tables. And I woke up this morning thinking about weaving and how people all over the world, for as long as there have been babies, have come together to hold their babies in families and communities, and with a whole range of practices for protecting babies, whether it's a blanket or a cradle board or things that I don't know about that are the ways that we hold babies. But it's about coming together, and I wanted to first say what I think the problem is that we're dealing with, which is really about disconnections, about the ways in which we hold our babies being disrupted by corporate culture, by commercial culture, by the loss of values, the loss of upholding what we believe is good and right for our babies in all of our families and all of our communities. And specifically in Indian country, and I hesitate to say anything as a not Native person, but I will trust all of you to tell me where I get it wrong. That's been the heart of our work for the 20 years we've been working in Indian country. The disruption of the connections that are woven together to hold babies so that they can thrive and grow. And so there are many other effects of colonization, genocide, and racially and ethnically based economic injustice. Here are just a few that I think are particularly relevant to how we hold our babies. Social isolation, the disenfranchisement and disempowerment, the trauma of racism and discrimination that people face every day, and the disruption of protective factors that are situated in traditional community and family structures, protective factors that are in indigenous knowledge of child rearing and human development. And language is culture, and language holds that knowledge, and language transmits that knowledge. I'm not telling most of you anything that you don't know, I'm just repeating what you know. The disruption of protective factors that are situated in the continuity of cultural identity from past to present to hope for the future, and protective factors that are situated in hope, trust, and connections within communities. So if we start from the premise that children's learning, health, and development, like all human development, depends on connections across space and time, connections in families. In most cultures, does not refer to nuclear families. It refers to extended family, to community. Connections in community, friends, neighbors, institutions, resources, knowledge, connections to the past and the future. That's where children's learning, health, and development happen. And in a way, you can think about the different programmatic interventions that have been developed within commercial cultures or corporate cultures or industrial cultures. They've basically been patches that have been put on the disruption of the blankets that hold babies. Colonization has resulted in the expropriation, as you all know, of land, of culture, of language and knowledge. It's disrupted relationships, it's disrupted trust and safety, and it's created these disconnections. And the way that looks in early childhood centers around the country, and I'm not just talking about in Indian country. Here's what we hear everywhere we go, and we've been going for since 1996. Families do not feel welcome. Parents do not trust teachers. Teachers do not trust parents. Children sense that their parents and teachers do not trust each other, and so they cannot relax and be open to their experience in early childhood centers. Teachers do not see parents' strengths. They make negative assumptions about them. They can't see when parents are trying their best. They make negative assumptions that interfere with their seeing what the obstacles are that are getting in the way of parents doing their best that they could help with. And again, I'm not talking about Indian country specifically. I'm talking about everywhere that we've been in all 50 states and territories, and in a number of the tribes where we have had the privilege and honor of working. And I don't mean to focus on the negatives. I say all these things because these are all things that are not universally true. There are islands of strengths everywhere amongst teachers in centers and in families. And these are not insurmountable obstacles. This is about recovering from the effects of colonization and genocide that make it unsafe and make it hard to trust and disrupt traditional knowledge about how we are in relationships. These are things that we can heal, we can recover from together. And I'm very cautious about making any statements about commonalities across Native American cultures because there are 567 federally recognized tribes, and each one has its own unique culture. And there are many more tribes that are not federally recognized. In the communities where we've had the honor of working, these are some of the commonalities that I cautiously share with you. Respect, generosity, honesty, and kindness as central values, a commitment to elders and to the earth, the understanding that it is the community that raises the child, and an awareness of the complex interactions of all beings. And I think that the first systems theorists were indigenous peoples. And that last one, all of these really are about how human development occurs in connections that have been disrupted by colonization and genocide and corporate culture. So I want to talk a bit about the solution, and the solution is rebuilding connections by beginning with a baby, because the baby mobilizes us. The baby brings out the best in all of us. The baby allows us to start from our hearts and to reach out to each other's hearts. And because the baby does bring wisdom from listening to mothers and fathers and aunties and uncles and grandparents during the last trimester of pregnancy. Babies are truly listening, and they are learning, and they're remembering, and they bring wisdom from the other side. So we begin with the babies to rebuild connections. And in the work that we've been doing in a number of tribal communities since 2001, we've shared humbly and with a caution that this is just where we're starting from. It could be all wrong for you, and we give it to you for you to examine closely, to see whether or not there are ways in which this might speak to you or might not work for you at all, ways in which that you might change it or transform it or indigenize it or make it your own. And the partnership of the Brazelton Touchpoint Center with tribal colleges has been in part about indigenizing. That's not my word, that's the word of some of my friends and colleagues in tribal colleges, indigenizing this work. So here are some of the assumptions that we share: that all parents have strengths, that parents are the experts on their children, that we need to recognize what we bring to the interaction, and that refers both to our passion for babies as well as to some of the assumptions that we might have, and to value disorganization and vulnerability, which we see as inherent in the process of human development. If we reflect on challenging moments in our own development that led to new insights and new understandings, they're often preceded by periods of great difficulty. And to understand that we go through these periods of disorganization and vulnerability as we get ready to come together in new ways with new skills and new capacities. I want to talk specifically about the work that we've done with a second cohort of tribal colleges and universities, and focus in particular on Keweenaw Bay Community College. But just want to mention that I spoke last week with Danielle Lansing at the Southwestern Indian Polytechnic Institute in Albuquerque, who was a part of our first cohort of tribal colleges that we worked with. And she told me very much the same thing that Cheryl LaRose, who's here today, told me about the more recent work with Keweenaw Bay. But the difference is that the work with that first cohort began many years ago now. And Danielle tells me that it is now embedded in the college classrooms and the early childhood center classrooms, and that it actually is the road onto which new students, new children, new parents step onto. It is already there for them, the path that they can walk on together. So there are a couple of points I wanted to make that I pulled out of my conversation with Cheryl, and thank you for your wisdom and guidance, and I hope you'll tell me where I get this wrong. There are several steps. First is vision and leadership. And first, when we come to a tribal college or to a community, the work is about coming together with leaders and opening up space to step back from reacting to crises, to vision the future together, and to discover what the shared dreams are, and to discover the passion for babies, children, and the path that they lead us to for the future of peoples. The second is forging the path, and as leaders come together, we then begin to think very specifically about what it will take to bring together the community to move forward with this vision. The third is experiential longitudinal learning. Smart funders don't fund training because training doesn't work. People forget what they learned after 6 months. So the work that we do is really helping people make the learning their own and then make it live and the way their organizations, like the early childhood centers, operate over time. And then the last that I wanted to mention is nation building. So what Cheryl described to me is that as they brought people together to share this vision and work on the learning together, they discovered that in a relatively small community that was connected to other communities and to state systems, that there were all kinds of resources and strengths and wisdom that they could weave together that they didn't know were there. And because part of the focus of the experience that we create together is on creating safety and trust and elevating the importance of relationship for learning and development, the relationships that get built in those initial experiences, Cheryl told me, have continued on, where people now turn to each other in the community, across agencies, across sectors, across disciplines, and to state systems as well for the resources and supports that they need together. So I'll stop there so that we have time for discussion and questions. I just wanted to thank those who have collaborated with us, and that's all of you here. That's the many tribal colleges that we worked with, the funders and partners that we've had over the years, some of the tribal nations that we've collaborated with in early childhood education and beyond. And here, and here are also some of the tribes that we've worked together with as researchers and evaluators for Project Launch. Finally, the vision that we would like to move towards is creating a Native Indigenous Research Center that is a center for data analysis and application and learning. Because one of the things that's come out of this work in all of these communities is that people take this approach, make it their own, and then they apply it to the challenge that they face, whether it's parental depression or engaging fathers or a host of other things. And so at the very beginning of our work in 2001, 2002, tribes were hesitant to come together and learn together and talk together. But after several years of getting to know each other, they spontaneously reach out to each other to learn and share. So that's our vision for where we go next, is to really create this space for visioning, for learning, and the safety to take risks in trying out new solutions based on ancient wisdom to solve the challenges that tribal communities face today. Thank you.